name's Jenna and today I'm here doing a book talk. The book I'm going to be talking about is The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne. I currently don't have a copy of this book because I lent it out to my sister who was very keen to read it because, you know, Hunger Games prequel and all that, so I don't have a physical copy right now, which kind of sucks, but like everything's fine. So if you don't know what Ballad is the prequel book to the Hunger Games trilogy written by Suzanne and it follows, oh, his name is not Cornelius. It's Coriolanus or something. Anyway, I call him Snow. So it is President Snow, but back when he is a fresh 18-year-old and he is working as a mentor on the Hunger Games. So it is the 10th Hunger Games ever, and we are getting to see that from his point of view. It was a bit of a weird concept when Suzanne sort of announced it, because obviously, as we all know, the Hunger Games trilogy is full of political allegory. It is just the most political books I have ever read. So knowing that she had chosen to come back to this series after so long and knew that she would be focusing on President Snow, it sort of got everybody thinking, me included, where is she going with this? What exactly is she trying to say? So as this is going to be a book talk, I am going to be spoiling things throughout the book, so if you have not yet read it, I do recommend you go and give it a read because there will be spoilers in this video. Otherwise, if you just don't care about spoilers, then feel free to stick around. First up though, I just wanted to say I gave this book a 5 out of 5 stars. I absolutely loved it. It was the perfect prequel in my opinion. It really helped us to build on the lore and the world of Panem and just gave us a real insight into what life was like. I can do maths in my head, 64 years before Katniss's Hunger Games. So I am going to attempt to talk about this in some kind of order, but as I was reading it, my thoughts were going all over the place, so you'll have to bear with me. So I ended up reading this one. It's set into 3 parts, just like the Hunger Games books were. So part 1 is Snow and they're building up to the Hunger Games. Part 2 is the Hunger Games themselves, and then part 3 is the aftermath of the Hunger Games. And I ended up reading this 1 part a night because it was the only way I was able to put the book down, otherwise I would have just binged the entire thing. It was very, very readable. I have been recommending this book to people as more of a character study rather than an action-packed book full of kids murdering each other, because obviously the Hunger Games original book is pretty much sold as kids murdering each other. While this one has a lot of murder and it has a lot of kids killing each other, it's not quite in the same vein because it does focus so much on Snow rather than on these tributes. This book really isn't anything like the original trilogy. It's very, very different, but I think it really just serves to expand upon the world and give us more of an insight to different characters, but also gives us the world that we know just from a different point of view. So one thing I will say is, going into this book, I was really, really concerned that Suzanne was trying to do some sort of redemption arc for Snow by showing us, you know, evil isn't born, it's made, and we have this guy who, you know, he's been through some really tough times, and as we go through, we would see how he became the President Snow that he was. And while in some respects that is what happened, I didn't sympathize with Snow once in this novel, and that is talking about a guy who is living with his cousin Tigris, which, sidebar, love that we got to see Tigris as like a young person, so good. But we have Snow and he is living with his grandmother who is holding on to the Snow family legacy because the Snows had all of their money in the nuclear stuff in District 13, which obviously has been destroyed, and both of Snow's parents have died, so he is sort of the last living embodiment of the Snow family name, and that is something that he does really carry with him throughout the novel. And despite that, I still didn't sympathize with him because every decision he made was so cold and calculating, and he felt for nobody at all, and that includes the relationship that he had with Lucy Gray. He does not feel for her, really. I don't think he's capable of feeling real feelings, and that was something that I found really, really interesting going through the novel. I think Suzanne really did nail this deep dive into his psyche, because we see this guy, this 18-year-old who is so much older than his 18 years, struggling to form meaningful connections in the world where everything that he's doing to benefit himself. He doesn't care about anyone else, really. He might think that he does on the surface, but when you actually really look at what he's doing and what he's saying, he cares about no one. I'm surprised he got married and like has a granddaughter. How did that happen? He is not a nice person. Who would like him. Anyway, I was fascinated by the early Hunger Games. I knew that this story was going to revolve around mentors and Snow mentoring someone, because in my brain I was sort of like, well, yeah, you know, that makes sense. Not every district has probably had a winner. It's only been 10, well, yeah, it's only been 10 years, so obviously not every district has had a winner, so of course they can't all be mentors, so it would make sense that Snow is a mentor. What I wasn't expecting is for there to be no mentors and this to be the first time the mentor program took place, and that it was all going to be people from the capital, people at this academy who are basically game makers in training, is pretty much what this academy was, and the academy was just wild to me. I think one of the best parts about this novel is seeing just how corrupt the capital is, because even though we're seeing it from Snow's point of view, and Snow, of course, he agrees with everything that goes on in the capital because that's who he was born and raised to be, even so, reading from his point of view as an outsider looking in, I can still see how corrupt the capital really is and how corrupt the citizens are, even though they don't necessarily see it that way. It was really, really wild to me to see that. Obviously, you know, we had the dark days of the rebellion, so this book took place, yeah, I think this book took place 10 years after the formation of the Hunger Games, so 10 years after the war ended. I think the war ended like pretty much when the Hunger Games began, or it was very close, but obviously we knew that for a couple of years during the dark days of the rebellion, the capital was being starved out, and so we learn a lot about these people who were living in this awful situation. Snow talks about how he remembers seeing people succumb to cannibalism, and it's just crazy to think that these people who have been through something so horrible can't see that the districts have been through the same, if not worse, and that was the reason for the rebellion. They just can't see beyond their own little bubble, and that's fascinating, because I think Suzanne Collins is correct in saying that the world has a hell of a lot of problems and most people can't seem to see beyond their own little bubble, and that is something so fascinating and so well done in this book, just from showing, I mean, just from showing how the tributes are treated. So obviously we know in Katniss's time, so by Katniss's Hunger Games, and for many years in Hunger Games before that, the capital love the Hunger Games. They absolutely love them. They love watching them. They love betting on them. They love the victory tour, which happens in between the Hunger Games. So we saw that in Katniss's. We saw the capital feeling that. Rewind that all the way back to the 10th Hunger Games, which is the one that we are reading about in this book, and we see a capital that a lot of the citizens don't like watching the Hunger Games. They don't think it is a good idea. They turn away from it. They turn away from these 24 children who are forced to murder each other. And that was really strange to me to read about, because I was so used to these Hunger Games that everybody loved. But, you know, when you strip it back and you think about it and you really think, if our society tomorrow decided to build an arena and chuck 24 children in it and force them to murder each other and want you to watch and to enjoy it, you wouldn't. You'd think it was pretty horrific and horrendous, and if you didn't think that, then you are part of the problem. So it definitely made sense that it had only been 10 years. These people are still rebuilding the capital, so the capital was not the fancy shiny buildings that we know from Katniss's time. This is a dark, desolate place that is desperately trying to rebuild itself, rebuild its people, and once a year they're asked to sit and watch 24 kids kill each other. So that was a really interesting thing for me to see that, because it did make me sort of think, well, yeah, if our society did all of a sudden start doing that, how long would it take for that to become normal, for you to get desensitized to it, for you to start looking forward to it? Because obviously, you know, back in the Roman time, they had the gladiator pits, people loved them. Did they love them to begin with, or is that something that they had to build up and start liking? And I just never thought that I would be thinking this deeply about a novel written in 2020, but here we are. Something as well with this Hunger Games that I was not expecting is, obviously we know from Katniss's time, the tributes are treated like royalty when they arrive in the capital. They arrive on a fancy train, they are glammed up, they have interviews and just the training, and they spend, I think, about a week in the capital before they get dumped into the arena. None of that is the case in this original Hunger Games. So Snow explains to us that up until this year, up until the 10th year, the tributes arrived, and they arrive on a cattle car. Basically, they're chained together, they've just been thrown in, they've had no food, and they are immediately thrown into the arena, which is an actual arena that is just, it's not very big, it's just, think of like a sports oval or something. That is it. All the doors are locked, you can't get out. There's weapons in the middle, and there you go. It's the same arena they've been using for the past 10 years. The weapons are the ones that are removed and then replaced. The place isn't clean, so it's full of dried blood. Obviously the bodies are taken out and disposed of, I guess, but that was weird. And then the winner is dumped back in their district, and that's it. They're not given, the district's not given food for a whole year. They don't get a house in the Victory's Square or Victory Place, Victory Street, wherever the Victors live. Victor's Village? I can't remember. But so there's no incentive to win apart from to live. Well, there's no incentive for the capital to want people to live, basically. And it's just, that wasn't even it though. So for this games, they decided they would have a mentor program, and they decided there would be interviews. So the tributes are going to be in the capital for a little bit longer before they're unceremoniously dumped into this arena. And during that time, the tributes are kept in a zoo, and they are treated with a veterinarian, not a doctor. And that is just a way of dehumanizing them. So the capital the capital just see them as animals. It's just weird. And then the fact that it's televised, but then when Snow in part 3, he ends up in District 12 as a peacekeeper, he notices that they don't really have electricity. There's no way in hell that these people in District 12 are actually really able to watch the Hunger Games, which of course is what the capital wants all along. They want everyone to be watching the games. They want them to be tuned in. Normally the games are over really, really quickly as well. They only take a couple of days, obviously, in this time, whereas I think Katniss was in the arena for almost 2 weeks, I believe. Whereas in this one, Lucy Gray, she's in there for a little bit longer. Not 2 weeks, a little bit longer than a couple of days, because before these games actually begun, we have this massive bombing that takes place, and it sort of opens up these catacombs down below, and so all of a sudden the games are a little more interesting because they have more places to hide. They don't need to come out as often. They're not in the open. They can't just start attacking each other. And that's when Snow in particular starts to get this idea that, oh, maybe we can make the arena more interesting. And then of course we have the introduction of the mutts in this game as well. So that's another way we can make the games more interesting. And that was Snow's role in this book, was to find a way to make the games more interesting. Another thing that I really did appreciate for this book is the fact that the dean of the academy came up with the idea of the Hunger Games when he was drunk, and was sort of like, oh, you know, wouldn't this be a cool thing to do? And Snow's dad goes, yeah, steals the idea, presents it to who becomes the head game maker, and we go from there. So that's the reason why Highbottom is always hating on Snow, because he's like, well, your dad did some real shitty stuff and now we have to deal with the Hunger Games. So I think so much of this book was a deep dive into not just Snow's psyche, but also society, and seeing, I mean, you don't like to think about it, but I could see a hell of a lot of similarities between Panem and the capital and the way the districts are treated to things that we see in our society today. And that's why I think Suzanne Collins is such a fantastic writer, in the fact that when she writes, she hones in on a problem in our society today and she fixates on it, and she goes, this is it, guys, this is where we're heading. And I think that is a possible, I mean, I don't like to think that that's where we're heading, but I definitely think one day we will all be fighting over resources. I think if there is another world war, it will be a world war over resources, because there are too many humans on this planet and we are just eating the earth faster than she can replenish herself. So I think that is a very long way in the future, but I do think these sorts of books, while they're completely fiction, also have some sort of resemblance of real life in them, and that is what makes them so good and what makes them so terrifying. So in part 1 of the novel, we have all of that explanation of the original Hunger Games. Snow, we get to see him trying to build himself up, trying not to let himself fall too much. He still doesn't have much food. The only time he really eats is at the academy, and then he is paired up with the District 12 girl, Lucy Gray. And that is an interesting choice. I think it was obviously a very deliberate choice because of the whole Katniss situation. And then to see him start to fall in love with her, like I said earlier, I don't think he's capable of that. I really do think everything he does, he's doing for himself, because as he is falling for her, in actuality what he's doing is he is realizing that there are ways he can use her. So then in the Hunger Games themselves, he spends all of his time, he's the one who comes up with the idea of sponsorship, so he manages to get food and water to Lucy so she can eat and drink and survive a little bit longer. Then because of everything that he's done in the games, he cheated a lot with, he actually managed to get a token into the arena which had poison in it, so she was able to poison somebody, and then he also she was able to cheat with the mutts so the mutts wouldn't attack her, and because of that he is then sent as a peacekeeper in District 12 for part 3, which that is the only time you might think maybe he's gaining some humanity, but he doesn't. He completely just betrays his friend Sejanus. He betrays everybody to save his own skin, pretty much, and that's all he ever will do. So it was interesting to sort of see this progression of him when realistically he was the same person from the beginning of the book to the end of the book. It was just he believed he wasn't, and so it was a really interesting ride to take with him. And we also got to see a lot of fun like little things to, you know, little nods to Katniss's. So we find out the fact that Lucy Gray wrote the Hanging Tree song, and it's based on a fact that they do watch this execution of this man who is strung up at a tree who says like he murdered 3 people. We get to see the Mockingjays, we get to learn a little bit more about them and how they work, and the Jabberjays and everything. So all of it was very interesting. We learn a lot more about people saying they think that there's free people in the north, and I think that's where District 13 was, up in the north. I can't quite remember the geography of Panem, but all of that was just fascinating, so interesting, and I do want another prequel to this series. For me though, I think if they're gonna do another prequel, I don't want to see Haymitch's games. I don't want to see anything that we've already heard about in books, particularly because I'd completely forgotten that District 12 had a winner because they'd erased all the tapes and we found that out. That's why no one really knew about District 12's winner. What I want to see if there is another prequel is I want to see how Panem got started. I think we figured out Panem had been around like at least 100, maybe 200 years before before the rebellion. I want to see what led to Panem happening. What happened in this world war? How did Panem rise from the ashes? Were the districts and the capital always at war, or did they start out being a really symbiotic society? Everyone did help each other. I'm just curious as to how all of that happened. And there you go. That is my book talk of The Ballad of Songbird and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know in the comment section below what you thought of this book. Did you agree that it was definitely a deep dive into not only Snow's psyche but also society as a whole? Because I would absolutely love to know. If you like this video, be sure to give it a huge thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss a thing. Stay random. Bye.